Hello, welcome back to another pen talk. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for following me as I explore this very interesting wide world of pens. I wanted to give myself a present for the holidays, and I obviously considered that Peniter Blue Bee, but somehow I just couldn't pull the trigger on it. So this pen showed up, and I pulled the trigger. And it arrived in a couple days, which is excellent, especially with the challenges with holiday shipping. FedEx does a beautiful job. So let's take a quick look at this pen. And I think Challenger Deep is really an appropriate name for it. We're going to explore that in more detail. Came with a nice card in which they tested the nib, which is always a good thing to do. And it also came with an interesting sticker. So let's dive in and look at this great model Vertex in a beautiful resin. Only 60 were made. We're going to explore the pen and the packaging that it comes in. So this is a familiar aluminum box. I don't know of any other pen that comes in a box like this. It's machined from a solid block of aluminum. This cover has a nice secure dimple on it. It's not going to come off accidentally. I love the sound of metal on metal. The other thing that's fun is on the other side of this is some interesting writing. We'll try to keep the glare to a minimum. And that last line is great because you got to have a sense of humor in this world that we live in, and I appreciate the sense of humor that Karas Pens has. And it also gives you some instructions on filling the pen. I mean, that's just cool. Instead of a piece of paper, which is not going to survive the test of time, they print it on the back of this cover. And that's, again, great design. Challenger Deep. Nice deep water trench there in the middle between the two E's. But it's the pen that we're interested in. And there's just a nice foam insert there, cutouts to easily retrieve the pen. And we see the pen. I think lighting is important to actually appreciate this unique resin. It has some interesting sparkle to it. When we looked at this in the beginning of the video, I had sunlight in addition to LEDs. Now I just have LEDs. It's dark out or dusk. The birds are feeding. One of the reasons why I bought this pen is this color intrigued me. And I think the Vertex will stand the test of time as one of the more functional pen designs ever. And I don't say that lightly. It's a pull-off cap. Notice there's not much sound. We'll explore the inside of the cap with the LED later. But those who know me should know what nib I got. I got a double broad. Just a standard feed. It's a Bock nib. The laser engraving is centered properly. The first versions of this were not, and we'll see that when I look at some of my other Vertex samples. And they have a couple of different colors for this section. I got blue, and I think this fits in perfectly with the pen. Understated, subtle. This pen is fine in the hand. I love that section. It's the right size. It's a little girthy, but I'd rather have a little girthy than too small. The other thing that this design lends itself to is a perfect posting. I mean, that just looks great posted. It's hard to even imagine it's posted. It's secure. It doesn't change the balance at all. This is definitely a pen that I would write with posted. That's saying a lot. And hopefully the lights are allowing you to appreciate this very, very nice resin. Just a touch of sparkle to give it some depth and a nice blue, shades of blue, and some black. I like it a lot. So this generation of the Vertex can be filled with ink 3 different ways. It takes a little bit of effort to start unscrewing that section because there's a nice rubber O-ring to seal everything up. Because one of the ways to use it is as an eyedropper. You can see the thickness of that acrylic, quite nice. It comes with a converter, you know, your classic German piston converter. Pops out easily, and that's a, you know, kind of like the mid-tier level converter from Schmidt. I think Schmidt makes all the converters in Germany. Works well. I mean, this section is also extremely well made. When I first got the pen, I unscrewed this nib assembly, and there's a nib assembly in there that unscrews. You can see those threads there. It was a little bit of effort to start the unscrewing, but you know, I used my rubber gripper and we were fine. And then when I reassembled it after I flushed the nib and feed, I put some silicone grease on threads. All the threads that I assemble get some silicone grease on it, and these threads will too. So this pen is just, I think, like, again, a design in every way. It works extremely well, functions extremely well, and is a great writing instrument. So we've gone dark, but we're going to bring in the LED to play on that resin. And it really does bring out the sparkle. Just amazing when you change lighting. For those of you that enjoy photography, I'm certain you've done your explorations of light and how it is affected. Digital media has changed that quite a bit, but it's still the same. If we go inside, we'll see where that O-ring is, and we'll see how thin that end of the cap is. As we go past the O-ring, no light comes through because now, well, a little bit of light comes through because that's the thicker part of the resin. Again, great engineering, well built, well thought out at every level. And they had a great resin to start with. How could you not like that? Yes, these pens are crab and turntable worthy, if ever a set of these 3 pens were. The dark green one is the first one that I got at the DC Pen Show, and it's kind of a prototype, but it works well. It's eyedropper only. I think it takes cartridge and no converter. The one in the middle, the gray one, named after a shark, is one that I bought earlier this year. There's an interesting nib on it, and we'll see all these 3 write because they all have 3 different nibs in them, and I think that would be useful for you to see. And of course we have the latest edition Challenger Deep. The LED lights plays on these resins very, very well. But the main thing is these are great writing instruments. They feel wonderful in the hand. Bock nibs are fine, and if anybody says anything differently, they're misinformed. While we're in dark mode, let's take a look inside these caps. The one on the right is from the first Vertex I got. You can see it has that machined ledge in there that seals up against the section. If we move over to the next generation one, you'll see the addition of an O-ring, which seals up even better. and secures the cap when it is capped. That's one thing great about engineers, is they constantly continue to try to improve their design and make it more functional for us, the users. So one of the things that I've always noticed is a snap cap takes more engineering than a screw-on cap, because you just make threads, set to make certain the dimensions are fine, and you screw on the cap and it's secure. Hopefully it seals well. These pens do not dry out, which is also very nice. You know, after a month I can pull the cap off and a little bit of touch and you're writing again. So one of the things when I did my review of this middle of the range one is the cap is loose. Still works fine. You can hear that when you uncap it. They recommend that you uncap it with the cap vertical so the ink is drained out of the section. If you uncap it this way, you may have some ink splatter come out. This first one also caps nicely, even without that O-ring being in. Oh, there we are. The O-ring is in there. Hopefully you can see it, even though I didn't see it with the LED. And this one I think is even better. It's more subtle with the closing mechanism, but it works well. The evolution of a design. I love it. So the other feature of the Vertex is this very, very functional ink window that you can see with the cap on, and it's very visible. As we turn the pen, we'll see the ink come in. So you can see this is probably a little bit less than half full. And there it is with the ink window with ink in it. Yeah, you can play with this all day. It works very, very well. Again, function over form, where form still is great. So one of the downsides of this design is no clip, no roll stop. But for those of you that must have a roll stop, here's our two examples. It's a nice pewter cat. Bieni might enjoy it. Has interesting eyes. And here's that snake from the Fulawin 017. So both of these stop the pen from rolling, because as we know, round pens roll. They must roll. The roads will roll. Mr. Heinlein. So there are options. I tend to be fine. I'm not walking around with pens in my pocket, my shirt pocket, like some people might still be doing. Retired, I stay at home. My pens are at my desk. If I do travel, I use a pen pouch. So to me, the addition of a roll stop is not necessary, but you have options if that's what you want. Finding an ink was an easy choice. Sea Flame number 291 from Pen BBS. A nice small bottle, but works well. From the color card, hopefully we can catch the glitter. It's nice because you see it at a particular angle. And it is a very nice color, reminiscent of the sea, kind of in the turquoise family. Blue with a little green. If we look at the chromatography, we'll see zero water resistance. But that silver glitter stays behind as the water pushes up the dyes. And you can see some intense blue and some very dark blue at the very top. And I see a little bit of green here, but then green is the one color that I have trouble seeing with my limited color blindness. But the real important thing is, how does it work in the pen? So you may already have figured out that I really like this pen. And I think from the first one that I owned to this third one, I can say without hesitation, without doubt, that if I could only have one pen, this would be the pen I would have. Simplistic design, functional design, function over form, but form doesn't sacrifice. And Keras Pens has gone to extreme lengths to find some incredible resins to use for this design that work well. You can uncap it with one hand, which is always a plus, and you can also post it with one hand, which is also a plus. Like I said, it's great in the hand. We'll give you the section dimensions. We'll give you the weights. And we'll give you the lengths to put things in perspective. There's a few things that one might say. Number one, it is a light pen. There's nothing wrong with a light pen because it is balanced and it feels good in the hand. And when you're writing long sessions, a light pen certainly is less fatiguing if the pen is comfortable in the hand. So I think we've expounded enough on the qualities of the pen. Let's see how that double broad Bock nib writes. So one of the things to me that a broad nib or a double broad nib brings to the table is it's smooth. This nib has a standard German feedback. Kind of like a BMW. You feel the paper under the nib, which I think is fine. Just a little bit more than normal. So this is a nib I would do some minor smoothing on. The flow is excellent. So I've had a number of broad and double broad nibs, and some of them have been a challenge to write with. But this one is not. I did flush it, which I do with every nib. And this is that Pen BBS glitter ink, so not the friendliest ink to a feed, but this works well. So I think it's time to rate the pen, and I'm going to give it a 9.9. And it gets 2 checks for the design, 2 checks for the build, the quality, the fit and finish. And I'm going to give it 2 checks for this double broad nib. As I mentioned before, this takes number 6 nibs, number 6 Bock nibs, so it's easy to swap out Goulets, Edisons, Jinhaos, Moonmans. I mean, there is a ton of nibs out there. And don't forget Knox. And Arlo from Palmer Pens in California would be more than happy to grind one of those nibs to be whatever you would like. So the nib really doesn't play into this overall ranking because it is so easily swapped out. But the nib in this pen is excellent. We're going to write real quick with the other models just to show you how those nibs work. So the first Vertex, the dark green one, I got with a Bock titanium nib. It's a fine titanium nib. And if I had to live with one nib, I could live with this nib. Let's see how it lays down this Edelstein olivine ink. Hopefully you can hear that this nib has less feedback than the double broad. And with a little bit of pressure, this is not vintage flex, so let's not be confused about what it is and what it isn't. But titanium nibs are soft, and they feel great on the paper. And as one might expect, you can get an unbelievable amount of ink on the paper. Let's look at the 1.1 that's in the other Vertex. So this is also smooth, not as smooth as the titanium nib, and it feels different than the double broad. It has a little, if you don't put any pressure on it, it really glides. And this is Edelstein Aquamarine, and this also puts down a decent amount of ink on the paper, not as much as the titanium nib. Considering the feeds are the same for both of these, it is a function of the nib. This pen I had to work on a lot when I got it, unlike the double broad in the latest one, which wrote perfectly the first time. But this is a nib that gives you line variation without putting any pressure on it, and it is a great nib in its own right. I hope you've enjoyed this look at a pen that I put up in my top 10, near the top of my top 10. So I'd like to thank you for watching. May you find a pen you really love, a nib you really love, ink and paper. Write often, write a lot. Doodle, sketch, just put ink on paper. I hope all of you are safe, healthy, and happy, enjoying the holidays. There's always holidays, so the end of December just seems to be a lot more of them. So we've reached the end of this video. Go out and write. Enjoy your pens. We're going to say bye until the next video. And this nib is very nice. I like it.